It is time for another edition of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, I am Jason Floyd, here to break down UFC 310. Goes down tomorrow night in Las Vegas. Of course, headlined by a flyweight title matchup and a rare situation where we have a fighter making their UFC debut, immediately getting a title matchup, then a co-main event, 5-round matchup in the welterweight division. It's essentially a number one contender matchup. Shavkat, Rakhmonov, Machado, Garry. Of course, Rakhmonov was supposed to be the main event of this fight card, challenging Belal Muhammad. Of course, Belal unable to make it here to fight day, even though he did some interviews last week, basically saying he's right back in training. So it sounds like he's going to be ready to go sometime Q1 in 2025. Of course, as always, we appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of Fight HQ podcast. As always, I am joined by the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. Pete, how's it going, man?
What is going on, Jason Floyd? What's up, everybody? Pretty solid card. Interested to see, what your take is on some of these fights. All in all, though, that there are some fighters that I do enjoy watching. So can't wait to see how they go out and perform under the lights. Some big implications for the co-main event, and same thing for the main event. I mean, not too often we see somebody making their debut, getting a title shot. Very odd circumstance, but from a promotional standpoint, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the fighting style that Kai has, I mean, I think that plays part of into it. I mean, typically these are one of these situations where more times than not, the UFC gives them a stylistically good fight for them to introduce them to the UFC fans. I think the UFC has done a very good job of introducing Kai Asakura to the UFC fan. Of course, I think we'll talk about the puncher's chance that he's going to have into it, but of course, what happens if we get into the grappling matchup there? Of course, also, when you look at the rest of this fight card, we got a rematch between Ciryl Gane and Alexandre Volkov. They fought a couple years ago. That was a 5-round matchup. Now it is a 3-round matchup. Of course, we did have one fighter miss weight earlier today, and that was Bryan battle. And I was sitting here in the office and had the weigh-ins up on one of my computer screens. And right when I saw Bryan battle walking to the scale, I'm like, ooh, he don't look good. And then when the executive director of the Nevada Commission says 175 pounds, you're like, ooh. So we're going to have to see whether that fight will continue on or not. Anthony Smith initially missed weight at 207.5 pounds. He made weight on his second attempt at 205.5 pounds. Of course, he is going to be taking on Dom Reyes. That's going to be the feature prelim right before the pay-per-view. But overall, I think it's a really nice card, 14-fight card to break down for you here on this episode of the Fight HQ podcast. And, of course, we do have our DraftKings contest. It is already up and active, so you can sign up for that contest. Of course, we got the offer from Stochastic, as you can get 15% off any MMA package. All you got to do is use that promo code FightHQ. Link to that is in the show notes, so you want to check that out as well. Of course, also got our Discord channel has been already active going on this morning. But Pete, as we talk about game theory, I mean, I think it really, for me, it starts main event, co-main event. Kai, we see the puncher's chance he has in there. Pantoja, I love the grappling upside. We've got a 5-round co-main event of Garry and Rakhmonov. I was a little surprised by not just the betting odds on that one, but also the DraftKings lines on that. I mean, I will tell you this, man, if you're looking for some value this week, call me crazy. I think Machado Garry is the value this week.
Yeah, I think he's the best value on the slate, personally, just because, you have a 5-round nature. You have a really cheap underdog in 7,000 for Garry to go out there. And the 5 rounds caters to his style. So it's not like it decreases his chances of winning. It actually increases his chances if he's able to survive the storm from Shavkat Rakhmonov. Garry is very good at playing at distance. So, and he's a point fighter where you have a finisher in Shavkat Rakhmonov. If it does touch the later rounds, it does favor Garry. So I'm in agreement with you that I think that he's a fantastic value. I think the main event is very important too. I can totally see a world where Kai Asakura wins, because I think we always, or have been, waiting for somebody to crack Pantoja and knock him out, because we see the openings. We see the defensive deficiencies that Pantoja has striking wise. Offensive wise, with his grappling, with his jiu-jitsu, with his striking, even, like, he's very, very dangerous, and he puts it together better than most people, or better than anybody in the division. And that's because he's the champion now. But there's moments where I'm like, man, I just don't see how this guy hasn't been knocked out yet. And you're going up against a very dangerous striker in Kai Asakura, who, when you go back and you watch his highlight reel, it's shocking. It's very nice to see a flyweight with this type of finishing capability. But then when you dive in onto some of the matchups, you're like, oh, okay, well, if Pantoja gets past that initial takedown defense, I think that he can really have his way with Kai Asakura. So I just think that regardless, you need to have both the main and co-main event. It's kind of a cop-out answer. They're both 5-round bouts, and it tends to work out in my favor where I like one underdog in one and one favorite in the other, so I can play both. I'm not in a situation where I have to pick and choose.
And, of course, we have 6 fighters who are 9,000 and above over on DraftKings, that being Ciryl, Gane, Dominick, Reyes, Shavkat, Rakhmonov, Kenny Nzechukwu, Bryce Mitchell, and Chase Hooper. Of course, Chase Hooper, a 13-1 betting favorite against Clay Guida. Of course, him and Clay Guida did have a grappling matchup 2 years ago where Chase Hooper did submit him in that one. And then when I look at some fights that I think are going to be priority fights, especially when we're talking about GPPs, I look at the first fight that's going to be on the pay-per-view, Nate Landwehr, Dooho Choi. If you've been following the sport, you know about Nate the Train. I mean, this is a guy that, look, there is not many American fighters that went over to Russia and said, give me whoever you want. And that was Nate Landwehr. I mean, that's exactly what he did there. I think Luque and Gorimbo is kind of a sneaky GPP fight in terms of how that can go. I'm actually really interested to kind of get your thoughts about who you think is the better grappler in terms of those two guys. And, other than that, there's just some fights that I really don't love for GPPs. Gane Volkov is one of those. Weidman Anders is another one of them. And Chiesa Griffin. I think those are the 3 fights in this card that I don't love when we're talking about a fantasy score upside.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on all 3 of those. I think that their opponents can somewhat neutralize their best path and make it into an ugly fight where it's kind of like a 50-50 fight, where it's not resulting in a ton of DFS production. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to be personally crossing off some of those fights for my single entry. Like Griffin Chiesa, I think is one where most people are going to be flocking to the underdog who has the grappling upside, and just hopes that he can really capitalize on Max Griffin's past where he did struggle against defending takedowns. The Anders Weidman one, that could be a father time play where you just play Eryk Anders because of the father time taking over and all the damage that Chris Weidman has accumulated throughout his career. If it does go long, which I do predict it does, they both suck when it comes to DFS scoring. Like they really do. They're not. I think it's going to be a ton of reversals against the cage, some cage stalling. If there's striking at range outside of a round 1 finish from Eryk Anders, I think it's just going to be blah. So normally the 8,200, 8,000 fight is a priority for me. I'm mostly going to let people just kind of, flock to that fight, and I'm going to pivot elsewhere. And then you hit the nail on the head, the Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling fight. That's one where you could have Sterling attempting takedowns, attempting to get the back of Evloev, who's probably the better wrestler in this situation, neutralizing it, capitalizing, countering. And, Evloev is not a finisher by any means. If he got a finish over Aljamain Sterling, I think that would be a beautiful feather in his cap. And I think from a promotional standpoint, he needs it because I think the UFC is starting to put some pressure on him. But when he's not the one in the driver's seat with the takedowns, and he's just taking his time, he has scored 66 in the past, 83 in the past, and that's against Mike Grundy and Enrique Barzola, who both have similar wrestling skills of Aljamain Sterling. So in matchups where he's facing a good wrestler, he hasn't necessarily translated to the best DFS score. So all in all, it seems like we're kind of aligned this week, which is not too common. Sometimes we're aligned with most of our picks, but it seems for the DFS strategy, we kind of seem to be looking at the card the same way.
Yeah, I know Aljo kind of took offense to be on the prelims, but there's a reason that fight is on the prelims. It's why a fight like Nate Landwehr and Dooho Choi is on the main card, just because of how it's going to deliver. You talk about Evloev, he's had 8 UFC fights, 8 decisions. Yes, he's 8-0 in the UFC, but we have talked about this now for weeks, is the fact of the UFC is sending a clear message that we are prioritizing fighters who are going to go out there and have exciting fights and are looking to finish. It doesn't matter whether it's on the feet or the ground. They just want to see fighters go out there and get the finish there. Of course, if you do have any questions on the fights, you can leave those right there in the YouTube chat. We'll get to those as we do go on. Also, I know there's some questions already in Discord. We'll get into that as well. Let's get right into it. The main event, flyweight title on the line as Pantoja makes his defense against Asakura. Asakura, of course, coming over from Reyes in the rare situation where a fighter coming over in their first UFC fight gets a immediate title shot here. I think a lot of that plays into kind of what the flyweight division currently is at this point. Of course, Pantoja is a minus 250 betting fair, plus 205 for Kai. Kai is 7,400 on DK, $15 on FanDuel. Pantoja, 8,800 on DK, and $20 on FanDuel. Of course, Pantoja coming off that successful title defense win against Steve Erceg back in May, which maybe if Steve Erceg has a little better fight IQ, maybe he's the one defending the title in this one. Of course, Asakura coming off that TKO win against Juan Archuleta nearly a year ago was the New Year's Eve card there in Ryzen. Of course, this is a third title defense for Pantoja. Successful wins against Royval and Erceg. He has gone the distance in all 4 of his UFC title fights. Never been finished in his career. Of course, that's something we're always talking about. I think when we look at kind of the other side, we all know what his striking abilities are. First time he did make weight, made it 124.5 pounds about an hour ago. This is the first time he competes at flyweight in 7 years. Been competing at bantamweight over there in Ryzen. 13 of his 21 wins have come by TKO and KO. Pete, what's your thoughts, man?
Yeah, so I mean, do I agree that, Kai Asakura should have been given, a title shot with his first UFC fight? I think it's a lot. It's a lot for somebody to succeed in their first fight, never mind having to face the champion. It's very difficult, especially when he's fought on the other side of the world. Now he's going to be coming over here in the States. You have a guy that isn't accustomed to the UFC, and octagon jitters are a real thing. I mean, yes, he's fought in the highest promotion on the other side of the world, and Ryzen is, a big deal, and he is a superstar, so he can probably handle the pressure and the lights better than most people. But I don't know, man. I would still have loved to see him come in, get his feet wet, so to speak, and then been given a shot or been, given an attempt. But I almost worry that the UFC, they see the potential in Kai Asakura. They see the finishing potential, but maybe they recognize the holes too. So they're like, well, do we feel much more confident that he's going to come in here and get a win against somebody not the champion? So we might as well give him a shot, because maybe they think that certain fighters would take advantage of some openings within the takedown department, making them grapple, pushing a pace on them. You're not always going to find the finish. When he does find the finish, he's put together some incredible wins. But he's also been knocked out too, right? Like, I'm not in love with his striking defense at all. I'm not in love with his chain wrestling defense. Like, initially, you'll see that he'll have good takedown defense. But now we're not in a ring, Jason. We're in an octagon. You're getting pushed up against the cage. So I think it's a completely different situation. And I can tell you firsthand, because I've owned a boxing ring with my father. My father owned it. And when we'd have MMA fights, we'd be getting our guys ready for it. And then, we're talking like 10, 12 years ago. And then we'd go and we'd fight in a cage. And it was a completely different game, because you're using the ropes to bounce off them. A lot of times fighters aren't able to pin you against the ropes because you're split and you're kind of like, dangling between them. It's just an advantage to the striker for sure. When you go into a cage, you can't rely on the people on the outside to help you stay in. You can't, hope that you're going to get a stalling call. Like, if Pantoja presses Kai Asakura against the cage, he's going to stay there, and then he's going to get taken down against the cage, because cage wall defense is completely different. So there's just too many factors for me to want to back the debuting fighter who's an electric fighter for the division in Kai Asakura. Amazing knees. He has the ability to knock out Pantoja when he changes levels. He might have some of the best knees in the business as far as knocking people out. He has a beautiful right hand too. I've always looked at Pantoja and wondered why nobody's knocked him out. I think that there is a person to do it. Is Kai Asakura that guy? Very well could be. He very well could be. And I was initially thinking it, but then when I really started to put, everything on paper, it's like, well, it's just too much for a debuting fighter, in my opinion, to go up against a guy who's been there, done that, been proven, put together good wins in striking, in grappling, in wrestling, been tested 25 minutes. Yeah, give me Alexandre Pantoja, and I think that once he gets his hands on Kai Asakura, it's going to be a little bit easier as each minute ticks off the clock. So, and he's from American Top Team, so how the hell can I not back a fighter from American Top Team? So, give me Alexandre Pantoja. I think he's a fantastic play this week, but it's not it's not a knock against Kai Asakura's skill. It's just styles make fights. So, Kai Asakura at 7,400 could easily knock out Alexandre Pantoja, and we could all look silly. I don't think it happens. And that's why I think Alexandre Pantoja at 8,800 is a very, very strong play and a core play for me.
I also think he's an excellent play over at FanDuel at $20. I think if you are playing over at FanDuel, Pantoja is a guy I don't mind getting to in more lineups than not there. And I'm glad actually you brought up about the ring versus cage, because I was actually going to. And I can tell you this, folks, me and Pete did not even discuss this before. I was going to bring it up to say, hey, because I heard a quote from Shelson this week where he was talking about, it was essentially paraphrasing what I heard was, hey, it's not a big deal because most fighters don't necessarily train in a cage. But I thought I'm happy that you brought up that point of, that's going to be very interesting to see how this one does play out there. And looking at the betting side of this equation, Pantoja plus 165 to win by submission, plus 275 to win by decision. I mean, but look, Kai at plus 350 win by TKO KO. I mean, that seems like to be the one if you want to throw a sprinkle on there. Maybe he's the one to go in there in terms of that. Now, the co-main event will be Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Ian Machado Garry. Of course, this fight came together a couple of weeks ago when Belal Muhammad was forced to pull out of this fight due to the injury he suffered. He did note yesterday that he was cleared this week, so he's back there in the gym. Of course, Rakhmonov, we have not seen him since almost a year ago, December 16, 2023. That second round TKO win there against Stephen Thompson. Ian Garry, we saw him there back in June where he got the win against Michael Page. Garry is a plus 290 betting underdog, minus 390 for Rakhmonov. Rakhmonov, $9,200 on DK, $21 on FanDuel. Garry, $7,000 on DK. And $12 on FanDuel. When you look at Rakhmonov, probably one of the craziest stats about him, 18-0, 18 finishes. That's something you necessarily don't see whether we're talking about mixed martial arts or boxing. And to me, what makes this one kind of an interesting one from a GPP aspect is the 5-round nature. If you told me this was a 3-round fight, I think my thought process may be a little different. And a lot of it does come down to is, what does Rakhmonov look like in a later third round, a fourth round, fifth round? He's only made to the third round twice in his career. 5 of his 6 UFC wins have come by submission. Garry has gone the distance in 5 of his 8 UFC fight scores. He was initially supposed to be in the main event next week against Joaquin Buckley. Of course, Joaquin Buckley now going to be taking on Colby Covington in this one. And of course, Pete, part of, I think, the storyline with this one is the fact of these two guys have trained together in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a fight, right? Like, I'm really interested. I was very surprised to see the betting lines be a little bit too wide, in my opinion. I understand why Rakhmonov's the favorite. I was kind of expecting it to be like minus 150, and I think that would make a lot of sense. Rakhmonov being such a large favorite, it could be, largely due to people's hatred towards Ian Garry, right? Ian Machado Garry is very cringy. He's really good though, and I think that he's still underrated. He's had some close matchups and he's outpointed his foes. So maybe some people are a little skeptical of his ceiling. Close fights against Jeff Neal, close fights against MVP. He's human. He's young, but I can say that in each performance, I've gone out there and I've been like, okay, he's surprised me. He really has surprised me, and I think we had a conversation saying like somebody's going to capitalize and beat him. You're just waiting for that one person, and it very well could be Shavkat Rakhmonov, who I think his best chance to beating Eden Machado Garry is utilizing his submission skills. That's that's pretty obvious, right? Like Shavkat Rakhmonov's best skill set, in my opinion, is his opportunistic submission skills. And he's very good with his chokes. His striking's good. I'm just not in love with Shavkat's defense. I think that he relies on his toughness so much. He relies on his chin a lot. His defense, to me, seems like somebody with great footwork and good volume can outpoint him and frustrate him and pick him apart and not allow Shavkat to, throw the Hail Mary and land the Hail Mary, and bail himself out of losing rounds. In my opinion, Ian Machado Garry kind of fits like what I expect the type of fighter to beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. Has good footwork, big for the division, long, good volume, high IQ. I worry about Ian Garry getting chinned. Of course I do. I mean, Song Kanan chinned him and knocked him down. Ian Machado Garry, what was on wobbly legs and worked his way back up against the cage and then worked himself back into the fight and ultimately found a way to win. He's going to have to weather a storm here against Shavkat Rakhmonov. I don't think it's going to be, smooth sailing from the opening bell. I am very intrigued with this matchup. I think the higher finishing upside clearly is with Shavkat Rakhmonov's 18-0 with 18 finishes. I think the frustrating, point fighting, fencing type of style of Ian Machado Garry makes him one of the best value plays on the slate. If he goes out and gets finished in round 1 or 2, well, obviously that's not true. But I kind of have faith that he's able to put together a good game plan. His time with Diego Lima, shoot the box, Charles Oliveira. I think that they have a nice game plan together of like what they need to do. So I'm going to be picking Ian Machado Garry, and I don't know if I'm alone. I know that you kind of hinted at it pre-show when we just talked for 2 minutes. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm value hunting, but I think this fight is a priority. And give me Ian Machado Garry at 7,000 to outpoint Shavkat Rakhmonov, or even if say he gets finished in the later rounds or whatnot. I think at 7,000 there's plenty of upside for him to score decently well.
Yeah, I mean, to me, looking for value in this card, Garry is a guy that I really looked at. When you look at it from a DraftKings aspect, 7,000, FanDuel, $12, and really what I'm counting on is this fight hitting the 4th or 5th round. Ian Garry being able to minimize and contain the takedowns of Rakhmonov, keep this fight on the feet. I played a video on my other podcast this week from Aljamain Sterling where he talked about it. He goes, I think Ian Garry's just going to outpoint him. He's going to sit on the outside. He's just going to pick him apart, and he's not going to let it become a grappling game. Now, look, Rakhmonov could clearly get him to the ground early on in this fight and potentially submit him, but to me, I like the value there. And I'll tell you, from the betting side, I think I'm gonna put a sprinkle on Ian Garry wins by decision at plus 650. I like the value in terms of that. Rakhmonov, if you like to win by submission, he is at plus 180. One of the things and Ian Machado Garry has really been doing a great job of promoting himself leading up to this one. I know there's people out there that don't like him and because of various reasons, but there was this one video I saw where he was asked who he thought stylistically was his most difficult opponent at 170. I was shocked by his answer. It's a guy he's already fought, Jeff Neal.
Really?
He basically talked about, he goes, that guy hits like a truck. And I thought it was really, when I heard it, I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. That would not, the answer, I was not expecting that answer from Ian in that one. But yeah, I thought that was a very interesting answer.
Interesting. And my take on this fight has literally nothing to do with the previous footage of them training together. I mean, there's a clip out there where Ian Garry is kind of pitter-pattering, outpointing Shavkat Rakhmonov. It's training. It's training. They're getting each other better. They're helping each other. My take is literally nothing to do with that. So it's independent of that, and it's more relying on the fight film where like I see openings against Shavkat. Shavkat's so dangerous offensively, but I
Mhm.
also think like his aggression, and he seems to be kind of like eyeing Ian Garry like he's prey, which is pretty scary. But I don't know. I think like he's human, obviously. We've seen him get knocked down outside the UFC. He's been hit and hit with some big shots. I'm not a guy that tends to pick people that rely on their toughness all that much when I see somebody else has superior skills. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to take the shot on Ian Garry.
I will tell you this. To me, the co-main event is the fight that I'm looking forward to the most on this card
Yes.
over the main event. I'm not going to be able to watch most of the prelims live. I'll catch the main card live. I'm going to a Christmas party on Saturday night. But to me, Rakhmonov Garry is a fight that gets me to the pay-per-view, especially the fact that I have to be at the stadium at 8:30 on Sunday morning. So I'm hoping this fight card does not go till like 2 o'clock in the morning. We get some finishes on the main card, and it's not a long night of fights there. Next up, we got a heavyweight rematch. Ciryl Gane looking to go to 2-0 against Alexandre Volkov. Gane is a minus 390 betting favorite. Plus 290 for Volkov. Gane 9,000 on DK, $19 on FanDuel. Volkov 7,200 on DK, and $11 on FanDuel. Of course, they fought back in 2021, which was a 5-round fight. Gane did get the decision victory in that one. Gane has alternated wins and losses in his last 5 fights, seeking back-to-back wins for the first time since 2021. Volkov very quietly has won 4 in a row, 5-1 since his last meeting with Gane, which the only loss in that time frame was against the interim heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall. And prior to his last matchup, which was a unanimous decision win against Pavlovich, he had won 3 straight by TKO KO. Pete, what's your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I love Alexander Volkov. I think that Volkov is what we all hope Stefan Struve would be. He's a skyscraper for the division, good straight punches, good straight kicks, very tough, volume based, rounded out his game. So he does have some jiu-jitsu skill as well. Really worked on his weakness, and now his weakness isn't all that bad at all. Alexander Volkov, though, in this matchup against Ciryl Gane, I think is going to still have problems. Ciryl Gane is a very special athlete, and there's a reason why the lines were so close in the Ciryl Gane against John Jones fight, which in hindsight, Jones made look like a circus because he went in there and put Gane at his weakest point and capitalized with the submission. I think outside of that fight, we've seen Ciryl Gane dance on the outside, float around, hit great combinations, switch his stances. He's so unique and he's so unorthodox that he gives problems because he's never stationary. And not only is he never stationary, he's never in one stance. He's shifting. He's blending his attacks from one to the other. He's cutting angles. His footwork is, I mean, it's not Dominic Cruz-esque, but like he really has some of the best footwork. He floats around there, man. And you got Volkov, who I think will be a sitting duck. Either one of these guys can look to implement some grappling. Neither one of them are spectacular. Obviously, the submission skill set, in my opinion, would favor Volkov slightly, which could come as a surprise to some people. But ever since Ciryl Gane lost that bout to John Jones, I kind of think that he's fully invested himself into submission grappling and wrestling, which is pretty silly to say. Like it should have been like that from the get go. Working on his weaknesses tremendously. But yeah, I really just see Ciryl Gane kind of, putting together everything a little bit better than Alexander Volkov. Volkov will have some success on the feet. I think this is a spectacular fight. But the way Gane switches stances and can blend everything a little bit better than Volkov, I think Gane's just going to be a step ahead. So give me Ciryl Gane to win a decision here or get a late finish. Not something I'm all in love with for DFS though. I think that 9,000 price tag on Ciryl Gane. Yeah, I was hoping like 8,500. 9,000. I'll probably pivot elsewhere. Because there needs to be some respect put on Alexander Volkov. He's freaking dangerous. He's nasty. He's on a 4-fight win streak over Rosenstruck, Romanov, Tai Tuivasa, and Sergey Pavlovich. But I think the footwork and the unorthodox striking of Ciryl Gane is going to do enough to get him the win here.
Yeah, the one thing I kind of thought of just thinking about this fight is could Volkov try to initiate some grappling just because of what we saw there in that John Jones matchup? And to me, from a DFS perspective, don't love this matchup for DFS, but if you're going to play Gane, I think your thought process got to be a little bit of a leverage spot in terms of that when you're looking at those 9,000 options, and if you're looking to get somebody who's likely going to be under 20% Gane, we are expecting is going to be under 20% there. I will say this in terms of the betting odds, I like Gane minus 150 to win by decision. I do think this fight ultimately, most likely, goes 15 minutes here. Of course, you got to remember our first fight was a 15-minute fight as opposed, or a 25-minute fight, and now it's only a 15-minute fight. Next up, we got Bryce Mitchell take on Kron Gracie. Gracie is the betting underdog here, plus 290, minus 950 for Mitchell. Mitchell, 9,500 DK, $22 on FanDuel. Gracie, 6,700 DK, and $9 on FanDuel. Of course, Kron Gracie is just inactivity, I think, would be about the best way to describe him in terms of what we've seen. I mean, entering the UFC in 2019, nearly had a 4-year layoff between his matchups against Cub Swanson and Charles Jourdain. It's now been 19 months since that matchup there against Charles Jourdain. Of course, he's lost back-to-back fights. Of course, back in 2019, he did win his UFC debut against Alexandre. Both of his losses in the UFC have come via decision. For Bryce Mitchell, he started 6-0 in the UFC. However, he is 1-2 in his last 3. Loss against Ilia Topuria, most recently against Josh Emmett. 6 of his 7 wins have come by decision. And, I mean, look, Pete, we can see the talent in Bryce Mitchell, but the thing that ultimately just concerns me the most about him is the lack of training partners. That's the thing that scares me about him.
I just think he's an idiot. I mean, that's what scares me about him.
I mean, isn't that well known? I mean, this is a guy who said he doesn't wear seatbelts.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the guy's a knucklehead. He really is, and I think people are a little worried about what Josh Emmett did to him, and I think for good reason. I mean, my God, that knockout was terrible. How does Mitchell respond? Right? Like, how does Mitchell come back? Could be really, really gun shy. Once people are knocked out in devastating fashion like that, they come back sometimes a shell of themselves because they're worried about getting into the firefight. They second guess every move. And they're waiting. They're okay with surviving. I was kind of intrigued to see the lines be so wide, especially since Bryce Mitchell went out and got knocked out so bad last time. But I think it's more about Kron Gracie than it is about Bryce Mitchell, right? Like, Kron Gracie's MMA game is just not good. It's not good. And a lot of the jiu-jitsu practitioners struggle in MMA because, you're getting punched, you're getting kicked, you're getting kneed, getting elbowed when you're attempting submissions. And also, a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners, pure jiu-jitsu practitioners, don't have great takedowns. We've been saying it for a very long time. When a jiu-jitsu guy tries to take you down, it's laughable. Unless they have really rounded out their game and worked with some high-level wrestlers, high-level judoka players. Kron Gracie has some incredible, notable wins in grappling. I mean, like, this guy is so talented when it's just grappling. The problem is on the feet, I think that he's going to be, getting hit from Bryce Mitchell, who has some sneaky striking. Well, definitely sneaky in this matchup and definitely better and superior in this matchup. And you have the wrestler in Bryce Mitchell who can dictate where this fight goes. So I think, like, Bryce Mitchell, this should be an easy win. He's a ranked fighter fighting somebody who hasn't fought in a very long time, is not ranked, and has really no notable wins. Alex Caceres is Kron Gracie's only notable win. And, it's just like one back take is what resulted in that win against Alex Caceres. The hardest part, though, is that when you have, pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and they just get one opportunity, sometimes they can capitalize so well, it's hard to predict. Like that back take, one scramble. And the problem with this matchup and paying a premium for Bryce Mitchell is that I think he's a bonehead and he's probably going to put the fight where Gracie has the best chance of winning. Like, do I trust Bryce Mitchell to go in there and not shoot a takedown? No, because that's his game, right? Like, that's his game. I don't expect him to be Mr. Sprawl and Brawl. He could, and I would suggest that if I was his coach. but I think he's got an ego, as most fighters do, and that he knows that he has the superior wrestling. So he's going to, put a stamp on rounds by taking down Kron Gracie, trying to stay safe, limit his susceptibility of getting put in submissions. But against a high level, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, Kron Gracie, it takes one mistake. So that's just where I'm looking at the line. I'm like, if you're laying that on a guy who just got knocked out, who's going to put the fight where his opponent is best at, I just think that it's a recipe for a disaster, and it's a recipe for a 6,700 fighter to actually come through and pull off a miraculous submission win. Do I think it happens? No, but there's many other fighters that I'd rather play and pivot to, just because I don't have to necessarily worry about those red flags. I mean, if you're calling it what it is, Bryce Mitchell should win this fight all day, every day. But he needs to stay outside of the guard of Kron Gracie. He needs to not get into a scramble and allow Kron Gracie to take his back for a second. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. So Bryce Mitchell's the pick. Bryce Mitchell's the play. But call me crazy. I don't hate Kron Gracie as 6,700, the biggest dart throw on the slate, just because that Bryce Mitchell's going to put him on this back and and look to grapple him. So I wouldn't mind getting to some Gracie in a 150 max in a single entry. There's no way I'm touching this fight. And if I had to, I mean, it makes more sense that Bryce Mitchell just dominates from the opening bell. But I'm just not going to play the fight.
I agree with everything you have to say there. I mean, it is kind of crazy when I look at the props here. The fact of Gracie wins via decision, or by submission, excuse me, is plus 1,200. I mean, that is just a crazy number there. And we'll throw up this, comment we got over there in the YouTube chat from Mr. Grapefruit. He says, I'm wondering if 6,700 Gracie comes into play if he loses and still gets like 40 points. And that's something that, Pete, you have talked about for a long time, is sitting there saying is sometimes you might be able to find that low end fighter that, hey, they go 3 rounds, but they're able to rack up 30, 40 points. And that could ultimately be the key in you taking down a GPP.
Yeah, I mean, I would love it if he had actual takedowns. I mean, he's pulling guard every time,
Yeah.
I think it would need to be like reversals. It would need to be top time and control time. It would need to be maybe landing on the feet too. Like, this needs to be a scramble fest for him to pay off if he does not win. And he has the jiu-jitsu and the scrambling ability to do so. I mean, the guy's beaten Garry in submission grappling. The guy is very, 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 very talented. So Bryce Mitchell just needs to fight MMA. You know what I mean? Like, this needs to be an MMA fight. Every opportunity you need to hit Kron Gracie. So it's not just where he's comfortable at. And, I kind of view Kron Gracie similar to Clay Guida, where they both have paths to score okay in a loss. Mm-hmm. But they are so volatile that I am expecting their opponents to dominate them. It's just like a conversation where if you hit the spend ups correctly and they score a ridiculous amount, you can get away with having a losing fighter in your lineup. But I don't hate that idea, Mr. Grapefruit. But for me, I do think that Bryce Mitchell wins here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he should win there as well. Our opening fight of the pay-per-view will be Nate Landwehr taking on Dooho Choi. Nate Landwehr is a minus 130 betting favorite, plus 110 for Choi. Choi is $7,800 on DK, $13 on FanDuel. Landwehr, $8,400 on DK, and $16 on FanDuel. Of course, both these fighters are coming off TKO victories. Nate getting that win against Jamal Emmers back in March, and Dooho Choi getting the win in July against Bill Algeo. Nate Landwehr, even though he's 5-3 in the UFC, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Choi is 1-0-1 since coming back after serving his mandatory 2-year military service back in his home country here. And, Pete, I talked about this at the beginning of the show. Like, this is a fight I have circled as a GPP priority.
Yeah, I think this is a priority, right? Like, I think the main event, co-main event, at least one of them. And I think that the Landwehr-Dooho Choi fight is something that I can't really get away from. The way that Nate Landwehr fights, he brings the action, he brings the pace, he brings the pressure, he tries to break every single fighter out there. In doing so, he's reckless. And in doing so, he takes shots and he gets dropped and he gets hurt. And every fight turns into a war. You only have so many wars in you before your chin really starts to abandon you. And I am worried about Nate Landwehr's chin. I am. And am I more worried now than I have been? No. It's just like every fight, you know what you're getting yourself into. So it's almost like you should play the unders in these fights where you have volatile fighters going out there, being very, very reckless. The X factor in this matchup is the takedown potential that Nate Landwehr does possess. He does have some very, very sneaky wrestling, some very sneaky jiu-jitsu as well, where I think he can make this fight look ridiculously easy against Dooho Choi. The problem is sometimes he gets takedowns, he gets advantageous positions, and he stands back up and wants to entertain the crowd. Nate Landwehr, though, is a fighter that, in my eyes, has impressed me more than Dooho Choi. Dooho Choi's previous fight over Bill Algeo, I don't know. Bill hasn't looked right in a little bit, and a guy in Bill who really has never been finished to get finished twice by Kyle Nelson and Dooho Choi just is very odd, and it seemed to be a shot to the eye that really bothered him. And I don't know, man. I'm not sold on Dooho Choi. Like he did have a draw against Kyle Nelson where Kyle Nelson utilized wrestling in that. Dooho Choi has the power to hurt Nate Landwehr, who has been hurt countless times. But I think far too often we bank on finishes. And give me the guy that has more ways to win in Nate Landwehr, where he can mix in everything. He can finish Dooho Choi on the feet. He can take him down. He can ground and pound him. He can submit him. The one worry is that, like, Nate Landwehr in his losses, he has been knocked out against Julian Erosa with a flying knee and against Herbert Burns with a knee in the clinch. And then he lost to Dan Ige. That Dan Ige fight was like, okay, well, if somebody smart, has good fight IQ, is coached well, and is well-rounded, they can beat a Nate Landwehr. I don't view Dooho Choi as being well-rounded. I view him as being a striking specialist. So I know that he got 2 takedowns against Bill Algeo. I think that's an anomaly. Mm-hmm. I think, if they tie up and they get into in the clinch and they start exchanging takedown attempts, Nate Landwehr is going to win that battle. And give me Nate Landwehr to break Dooho Choi at 8,400. All in all, I love the fight, though. So, like, this needs to be a part of almost all your lineups. I think this is going to score fantastic regardless of the result.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a fight you got to have circled when you're creating those lineups, whether, you're playing a 150 max, 20 max, or maybe you're just doing single entries. I mean, this to me is the one you got to circle here. By the way, Nate Landwehr wins by TKO KO plus 300. That is one of the prop bets that I have highlighted here on my sheet. Then we got to our featured prelim matchup. It's going to be a light heavyweight matchup between Anthony Smith and Dominick Reyes. Anthony Smith did need 2 opportunities to make weight here today. Made weight right there at the end. Of course, Dom Reyes is the betting favorite in this one. Is a sizable betting favorite in this one. Nearly a 4-1 betting favorite in terms of this one. Reyes, 9,100 DK, $20 on FanDuel. Anthony Smith, 7,100 on DK. And $11 on FanDuel. Of course, Dom Reyes finally snapped that losing streak in his last matchup back in June, getting a first-round TKO against Dustin Jacoby. Anthony Smith is coming off a unanimous decision loss against Roman Dolidze back there in June. And, of course, that win for Dom Reyes back earlier this year with first win since 2019. Something to note here, 3 of his 4 UFC losses have come by TKO KO, has never been submitted. For Anthony Smith, 2-4 since 2022. He alternating wins and losses in the last 4 fights. And, when he stepped to the scale initially, I was like, oh man, doesn't look awful, but man, doesn't look great. And, I was watching a little bit of his media interview yesterday, and I don't know what it is, just something, the body language just seems off to me. And I do believe this, when we talk about UFC 310 6 months from now, I think we're going to talk about it being the last UFC fight for multiple fighters, and I think I put Anthony Smith in that category.
Really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm in agreement with you that I think that Anthony Smith is acting quite odd. His body language is off. See, obviously he's dealing with a death of a very close friend of his, so he's in a lot of pain. He's dealing with grieving through that, and a lot of times athletes, they deal with grief and they deal with pain in their life through competition or through the sport that they have dedicated themselves to. In this fight, though, in this game, you have to be very careful with using that to channeling that into your fights. Like sometimes it works for you and a lot of times it doesn't. When you go and you fight emotional, you know, it doesn't work for you. I remember when Mark Hominick was dealing with the death of his coach, and he went out there and I believe it was against a Korean Zombie. He got knocked out in like 7-8 seconds because he went out there and was just so upset and so emotional from the pain of losing his coach that he got stepped back, cracked, and the fight was over. This is kind of what I'm seeing, right? Like I'm kind of seeing where Dom Reyes could really pick up a quick win bonus if Anthony Smith comes out there like a lunatic. It could work out for Anthony Smith. He could break and he could hurt Dominick Reyes. He could bully Dominick Reyes. Anthony Smith was just talking. He doesn't care about winning. He just wants to go out and hurt somebody. We've all lost people, so we understand that. I just would circle Anthony Smith and say extremely volatile. I just think that's what it is, especially given the circumstances. Now, in 2024, though, and for a while, I mean, I think I'm out of the Anthony Smith business. I just am. I just don't know if he's good. He doesn't seem to be a ranked fighter, and he doesn't seem to be somebody who's, even stable. He seems like he is rapidly descending. So I am not like somebody that should be backing Anthony Smith. I think the win over Vitor Petrino is somewhat fluky as well. Was pinned against the cage, got a guillotine because Petrino's young in the game. I think a guy in Dominick Reyes just kind of has him covered here. He just knocked out Dustin Jacoby. He's a monster of a man. Very powerful left hand, a very big southpaw. I just think stylistically going to give Anthony Smith problems. And a lot of times, like Anthony Smith always in the buildup and, heading into the fight, you're expecting him to go out there and be, like the best version of himself. And he just doesn't deliver. He just goes out there and he almost just doesn't engage half the time. So I don't know, man. I'm out of the Anthony Smith business. I think that Dom Reyes is completely live to get a quick win bonus. I think that he's live to knock out Anthony Smith. I just don't have any trust in Anthony Smith right now, but we've seen sometimes some athletes can channel it the correct way. I mean, Damon Jackson, if I'm not mistaken, lost his brother or something like that right before the Pat Sabatini fight. And, he went out there and it led to him putting on one of the best performances in the world. So, of his career rather. So I don't know. I am going to be backing Dominick Reyes. I think that he finishes Anthony Smith, and I think Anthony Smith is breakable in 2024.
Yeah, it's to me, something about the body language really stuck out to me. And also, I think if you're Dom Reyes, even though, yes, you just snapped a 4-fight losing streak, the path to getting to a title matchup in the light heavyweight division is a very quick path. And I know there was a comment about Jamal Hill, and most of the comments I've seen on Twitter about that have been more about Jamal Hill's physique than anything else. People kind of questioning, how much weight maybe he would need to cut right now to make 205 pounds. But we'll see what happens in terms of that one. But I'm with you. I do like Dom Reyes to go out there and get the win. And really, it just comes down to at this point in his career, I just can't trust Anthony Smith. Next up, we got Vicente Luque taking on Themba Gorimbo. Gorimbo is a minus 160 betting favorite, plus 135 for Luque. Luque, 7,600 DK, $13 on FanDuel. Gorimbo, 8,600 DK, $17 on FanDuel. Initially, Vicente Luque was going to be taking on Nick Diaz. Of course, that matchup was initially supposed to take place in August. Ends up getting moved to this card. Ultimately, that fight did not come together. And for Vicente Luque, this was his first fight since March when he had that TKO loss there against Joaquin Buckley. Luque 1-3 in his last 4 matchups, losses against Bilal Muhammad, Jeff Neal, and Buckley. And you look at the other side for Gorimbo. Gorimbo coming off a unanimous decision win against Nico Price. He's won 4 straight after losing his UFC debut against AJ Fletcher. 3 of his 4 wins have come via decision. And, Pete, when I was, putting together, throughout this week, my notes on this card, the one thing I say, I got to ask Pete this, who's the better grappler? Is it Gorimbo or is it what we've seen from Luque recently?
I'll tell you, the better wrestler is Gorimbo. The better wrestler is Gorimbo. The better submission artist is Vicente Luque. This could be a trap, and it could be a trap on both sides, right? Like, this could be a trap where people are favoring the hot prospect, if you will, of Themba Gorimbo, who is 4-1 in the UFC. Victories over Takashi Sato, Pete Rodriguez, Ramirez, Rakhmonov, Nico Price, losing his debut to AJ Fletcher after putting him in some compromising situations and then getting reversed and getting guillotined in the second round. It all comes down to, are you a Themba Gorimbo believer or not? I mean, I wasn't the biggest believer, but I was also a huge AJ Fletcher guy, and that really didn't work out. But Vicente Luque in 2024, it's just like, well, I don't know, Jason. I similar to Anthony Smith, I might be out on Vicente Luque, and I could be dead wrong. This is a guy who's fought literally the best fighters within the division, has some of the most finishes within the division, if not the most. Back in 2022, he fought Bilal Muhammad, Jeff Neal, and then most recently in 2023, in August, picked up a victory against Rafael Dos Anjos, where he was the better wrestler, which was, you could expose RDA that way, who's a blown-up lightweight. And then most recently in 2024, he got knocked out against Joaquin Buckley and really never had much success. Or when he did, it just, I don't know, he seems to be a shell of himself. And Vicente Luque's battled with some health conditions and some health scares, right? Like he had a brain bleed. Mm-hmm. So there was a moment where his career was in question. And truthfully, do I want to see him fight? I'm not sure, man. He's done so much. That there's no more ascension in his game where he's not going to be, climbing the ranks. At least I don't believe so. I don't think that he's going to become a champion anytime soon. The problem is that, like, when you're a high-level fighter like this, you're used to getting big paydays. And I really think that's what it could be. Like, yes, he's not quitting on himself because he's so skilled. But I just think that, he's not what he used to be. And I can honestly say that. I mean, this is a very, 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 very nice spot to buy low on Vicente Luque if you know some inside information and you think that he's back. Because Themba Gorimbo has yet to be exposed. And in the fight where he was submitted, it was against AJ Fletcher, who doesn't have better submission skills than Vicente Luque, who has one of the best Darce chokes in the game. So this could be a situation where Vicente Luque really is just opportunistic and snatches up the neck of Themba Gorimbo. The thing, though, is that, like, I think Themba's wrestling skill allows him to throw a little bit more on the feet and heavier on the feet. He's allowed to let his hands go because he's not worried about getting taken down. He's usually the better wrestler of the two. And he throws with bad intentions. And honestly, despite the lack of skill in the striking, I think he's live to knock out Vicente Luque. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, I think that chin is gone. I think the desire the hunger and the desire to fight hard is gone from Vicente Luque. I hope I'm wrong. I'm a big fan of Vicente Luque. But I'm seeing a really hungry up-and-comer against a guy who's been here and done that, but has not had much success lately. And also, I just think that Vicente Luque is live to get taken down a ton of times here and like never really get into the fight because I think that Gorimbo is going to be wise enough to leaving his neck out there. So yeah, this fight's very intriguing. I don't blame you if you want to throw some money on Vicente Luque, who should have the better boxing, but I don't think he's going to be able to box. I think he's going to be defending takedowns. Should have the better submission offense, but he could be stuck in defensive wrestling mode the whole game. So give me 8,600 Themba Gorimbo. I think like this is a notable name that he can capitalize on, and on paper it looks like a big win. But in 2024, like, the win over Brahimai might be more impressive than this win over Vicente Luque. So give me Themba Gorimbo here at 8,600. I think regardless, though, this is a very sneaky fight to target for DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've talked about this plenty of times, you never really know when the downside of a fighter's career is going to come. And I think if you look at the way the UFC has attempted to book Vicente Luque here recently, trying to have him fight Nick Diaz. Now on to this one. I mean, to me, this is just classic UFC matchmaking here. You have the up-and-coming guy in Gorimbo. They believe they have something there with him in terms of that one. But, I think Luque is going to be a popular underdog that people are going to get to. So it could potentially be a little bit of a leverage spot if you want to get away from that. Next up, we got a featherweight matchup of Evloev and Aljo. Of course, Aljo is the betting underdog here, a 2-1 betting underdog, minus 245. For Evloev, which is kind of another surprising line in terms of this one. Evloev $8,900 DK, $18 on FanDuel, Sterling $7,300 on DK, and $12 over there on FanDuel. Evloev is coming off that unanimous decision win against Arnold Allen. Sterling coming off that unanimous decision win against Calvin Kattar. Evloev mentioned a stat we're going to show 8-0 in the UFC, but all of those fights have gone the distance. For Aljo, of course, this matchup was supposed to take place back in October. He gets injured, ends up pushing it back 2 months. But also, he's kind of that similar situation of Evloev, where 9 of his 16 wins have come via decision here. And, look, we saw what Aljo looked like in his UFC featherweight debut against Calvin Kattar. Was it an exciting fight? No, it was not. It was not an exciting fight, but it was dominating, Pete.
Yeah, it was dominant. And, I think that's just a stylistic clash between a very good striker in Calvin Kattar and a very good wrestler in Aljamain Sterling. I don't think that is going to be the standard moving forward for Aljamain Sterling at 145. I think that he's going to meet some resistance, and he's going to be pretty surprised at how good some of these fighters can wrestle. Movsar Evloev is one of the most well-rounded fighters within the featherweight division. I would label him a very talented fighter. Would I label him exciting? Not the most exciting, but I can appreciate his skills. He's 8,900 in this matchup, whereas Aljamain Sterling 7,300. I think this could be a reach again, and I think it could be a value reach where people are like thinking the Aljamain Sterling against Calvin Kattar is going to show up in this matchup against Movsar Evloev. I just don't see that happening. Like, the best skill set for Aljamain Sterling is his wrestling and grappling, but it's the back-taking ability. He's able to back-take and backpack people to pick up control time, to threaten with submissions, but largely to bank rounds. Could he get the back twice and win 2 rounds? Yeah, he could. But I really am I'm a believer in Movsar Evloev's wrestling and his jiu-jitsu skills and the fact that he's from American Top Team. I think that this guy is going to be extremely prepped for this matchup. Could Aljo do enough in a loss to possibly make it through? Yeah, but there's 14 fights, so the likelihood of a losing fighter being a part of the optimal lineup, not that likely. I think that Evloev is going to surprise some people. I think that he can be the better wrestler of the two here. He can be the guy getting takedowns against Aljamain Sterling, showing that he's a true 145er. I think Aljo is big enough to be a 145er, but it's different when you've been accustomed to competing against bantamweights. Now you're going to be competing against featherweights. So he's big enough, he's strong enough, he's talented enough to be a featherweight. I just think it's going to be a little bit of learning curve. I almost feel like he gave himself probably the best matchup, or one of the best matchups, in his featherweight debut against Calvin Kattar. And I don't see it that way here. I think that Movsar Evloev rolls. I think that Evloev could even sweep him 3 rounds to none. I even think that Evloev could possibly work towards a finish, even though he hasn't done so in the UFC yet in 8 fights. I just think that Evloev has him covered here. And maybe I'm overrating Evloev and underrating Aljamain Sterling. But for me, it's Evloev to pick up the victory here. And I think that he could get some control time, and I'm not so sure that Aljamain Sterling is going to get all that much control time. So give me Evloev to win a decision here at 8,900.
Look, I'm with you on the fight going decision. I'm on the.
You on Aljo?
I'm on Aljo. Really? I think Aljo gets the job done here. I think the size will be an advantage for him in terms of this one. I mean, look, fancy score upside. I'm not high on either one of these guys as a fancy score upside. Even though, I mean, now look, Aljo went out there and scored 114 in his last matchup, but that also, you're going against someone that doesn't have great takedown defense. I mean, I do like Aljo to win via decision at plus 350. That's one that I do have circled here. But look, I think it's 29-28 either way. Wouldn't surprise me if this is in a split decision, but I just don't think it's going to be a high fantasy scoring upside matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you with the DFS production. You know, this matchup is interesting, um, and it could result into being a leverage play for Movsar Evloev. Um, but yeah, I'm going to, I'm not afraid to pick underdogs. You guys know me. I picked plenty of crazy ones and they've come through. Plenty of crazy ones and they haven't. I'm not one to always pick favorites, but this week I'm not in love with a lot of underdogs. And I don't know if I'm on an island by saying that, but I'm not in love with a lot of underdogs. And oddly enough, the one underdog is in the co-main event, and it's Ian Garry.
Yeah. Move over to our next matchup. I was just checking X to see if there was any updates on this one of Randy Brown and Bryan Battle. Bryan Battle weighing in at 175 pounds, so he missed weight by 4 pounds, and so that's probably going to come down to a negotiation between both of these camps, but also the commission allowing Bryan Battle to continue, because when he made that walk to the cage or walk up to the scale, just did not look very good there. But when you look at this matchup, Randy Brown is a plus 180 betting underdog, minus 220 for Battle. Battle $8,700 on DK, $18 on FanDuel. Brown $7,500 on DK. And $12 on FanDuel. Randy Brown coming off that win against Zaleski dos Santos back in June. Bryan Battle coming off a second-round TKO win against Kevin Doucette back there in September. Randy Brown has won 3 in a row. 2 of those have come by decision. 7 of his 13 UFC wins are by decision. 9, very quietly, 9-2 since 2019. Both those losses were via finish. And when you look at Bryan Battle, 3-0, 1 no contest in his last 4 fights. 5 of 6 UFC wins have come via stoppage, and his only UFC loss came against Hanat, and that was via decision. Pete, what's your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I don't like the weight miss for Bryan Battle, but I mean, he has missed weight in the past, and he's missed weight in the past, but he's also gone out there and put on fantastic performances. His weight miss was against Gabe Green, and then he knocked him out in 14 seconds. So I just think that we have Bryan Battle, who's a guy that has fought at heavyweight in the past and has had such a significant body transformation over the course of his career and his life, that like he's a big guy. And a lot of times fighters are pushing the limits to make weight and to be at the biggest size advantage possible within their weight class. And I think that's what we have in Bryan Battle, where he needs to, make some adjustments, whether that's, how he's water loading, what he's doing for dieting, what he's doing for strength and conditioning. He'll figure it out. Not every weight cut's the same. As you get older, it gets significantly more difficult. But his skill set seems to be on an upward trajectory, and he is just getting so damn good. I think he's really talented. He's a problem. I think that he is a very dangerous fighter for this division. He impressed the hell out of me against Kevin Doucette. I got to be honest. I mean, I thought that Doucette, who, coming from City Kickboxing, has very underrated striking, has a, judoka background, can win a decision. I mean, the striking that we saw from Bryan Battle offensively is something to admire, right? Like, he puts combinations together, beautiful straight punches, good volume striking. My biggest problem with Bryan Battle is his lack of head movement. I think he's like a statue. His head is there to be hit. And going up against a guy in Randy Brown who hits so significantly hard, I don't love that for him. I really don't love that for him. But I think that he has the style to pose, Randy Brown, who is one of my favorite fighters. I love Randy Brown. I think he has the style to give Randy Brown some problems. At space in the middle of the octagon, that's where you're going to see Randy Brown shine with his straight punches, with his kicks, and his good footwork. He has the better boxing, slightly, and definitely the better, head movement and defensive skills. Bryan Battle just walks people down, gets them to the black line, starts to break them. He's got good kicks too, and his wrestling and his submission grappling, I think, is an X factor here. Like, Randy Brown, it has good submission skills. I think I'd give Bryan Battle the edge in the grappling. I really would. But to me, this is a very, very close fight. One where I think 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I might be picking Randy Brown to pull off the upset in a decision victory. But man, I don't know if I'm kind of captured by recency bias, but Bryan Battle has really, really impressed me. And if you look at who he's done it against, it's against some younger fighters, but they are talented. Gabe Green, AJ Fletcher, Ange Lusa, Kevin Jusei, the short notice replacement against Hanat Fakhretdinov, Takashi Sato, Trayshawn Gore, Gilbert Urbina. Whereas Randy Brown's recent run seems to be against like really aged fighters. Zaleski dos Santos, Muslim Salikov, Francisco Trinaldo, Wellington Turman, Jack Della Maddalena's in there. I don't know, man. I think that the strength of schedule slightly favors Bryan Battle going up against younger foes. And I know Randy Brown's my guy, but I feel like Bryan Battle breaks him. I think he breaks him one way or another. And I'm not really too concerned about the weight miss. I think he was more disappointed in himself and more deflated from missing weight once again than, looking physically ill from the weight cut. But maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, give me Bryan Battle. I'm not too worried about the weight cut.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's going to be probably more of a equation of if the commission is going to let that fight continue, especially when a fighter misses weight by that much. And the fact of just searching on X, there's been nothing about the two sides have come to an agreement on what, the penalty is going to be for Bryan Battle missing weight here. So something to pay attention to. And then, of course, if you get close to lock time and we don't have a lot of answers, you might want to proceed with caution without matchup. That's all I'm saying in terms of that one. Next up, we got Chris Weidman versus Eryk Anders. Of course, this is a matchup that was supposed to take place last month at UFC 309, canceled on fight day due to Eryk Anders coming down with food poisoning here. Of course, that matchup was going to be at 185. Now, this is a catch weight at 195. Eryk Anders weighing in at 193. Chris Weidman weighing in at 194 and a half. And we cut the betting odds. Weidman minus 115, minus 105 for Anders. Anders $8,200 on DK, $14 on FanDuel. Weidman $8,000 on DK and $15 on FanDuel. And we broke down this fight last month. I mean, so I don't know if there's too much more we need to get into it, but we look at Chris Weidman. The stat with him is the fact that he hasn't got a stoppage win since 2017 against Kelvin Gastelum. His last two wins have come by decision. He scored in the 80 range over there on DraftKings. Eryk Anders, he's a 500 fighter in the UFC. Majority of his fights do go the distance, and every time I think of an Eryk Anders fight, and we're talking about from a fantasy aspect of this one, I just go, man, I don't love the fantasy score upside on either one of these guys.
Yeah, I'm not in love with this fight for DFS production. 8,200, 8,000 fights, a fight I usually tend to put in my lineups a little bit more than usual. It's a close fight, and they're pretty similar in their approaches to the game. They have had striking success. They tend to lean a little bit more on their wrestling. It's kind of odd. Anders came in knocking people out and being the striker. He started to really dedicate himself to the wrestling and the grappling, especially on the grappling scene, just kind of throwing him in there and staying active with that. Weidman, known for being one of the best jiu-jitsu phenoms on the rise, comes into the game as a good wrestler as well. Starts striking, falls in love with his striking. So they've kind of reversed their roles. There was a time where Weidman would get hit and get knocked out, and he was on such a bad run where like you had to really worry about his chin. I almost think like the leg injury like kind of helped him because he stayed on the sidelines, allowing his brain to heal, maybe laying off the sparring too. He didn't really have a choice, but like going into war after war after war, you're more susceptible to be knocked out. And I expected him to get knocked out if against Bruno Silva. Like Bruno Silva has always knocked people out. He defends takedowns or gets taken down a lot and then lands a shot and throws that Hail Mary and knocks his opponent out. Weidman took some shots in that matchup and he knocked down Bruno Silva. He took him down. I think this is a situation where Anders is always live to knock out Weidman because of Weidman's chin problems. But given how Anders has been wrestling and grappling so much, I think that he's going to resort to that. I still would give the edge in the wrestling and the grappling to Chris Weidman. The size to Eryk Anders. They're both pretty big for the division. I think it's going to be a lot of reversals against the cage, a lot of stalling. And then it's going to be like, okay, well, how did we score that round? Well, Weidman threw a little bit more than Anders, who's a little too patient at times. Um, I'm going to be giving Weidman the nod, but I don't think that it's going to be a good score regardless of who wins this fight. So, yeah, Weidman wins for me at 8,000, wins a decision. But I think the winner scores like 60, 70 points. I just don't think it's necessary for your lineups. I mean, obviously, if Anders has the finishing upside. Weidman doesn't. And I'd be very surprised if Weidman picked up a finish. But give me Chris Weidman to pull off the slight upset via decision.
Yeah, I mean, the decision prop either one of these guys. I mean, I do favor Weidman, and the decision prop is at plus 150. And Andrew, as Pete was talking, I saw your comment come across. I just started laughing a little bit. It is kind of, Browns fans, I guess, have forgotten. They would like Baker back, but that is definitely not going to happen there. Next up, we got Cody Durden taking on Joshua Van. Cody Durden is a plus 130 betting underdog, minus 155 for Joshua Van. Van, $8,500 on DK, $16 on FanDuel. Durden, $7,700 on DK. And $13 on FanDuel. Durden is coming off a second-round submission win against Matt Schnell back in September. You look at Joshua Van, obviously a high strikes land per minute for him. For Durden, did that victory against Snell did snap a 2-fight losing streak. 4 of his 6 UFC wins have come by decision. And I was telling Pete before we started doing the show here, I think Joshua Van is a candidate to live bet after the first round. I expect Cody Durden to get there. And I did see a note on X earlier today that Cody Durden is predicting a second-round submission win.
Yeah, I mean, Joshua Van is a guy that I'm really, really, I'm really behind for who can climb the rankings, and I'm pretty impressed with his overall UFC career. He's 4-1. I mean, he beat Zhalgas Zhumagulov in his debut, Kevin Borjas, Felipe Bunez, lost to Charles Johnson via third-round knockout, where Charles Johnson doesn't really knock people out, and then most recently beat Edgar Chairez in a crazy, crazy fight. Joshua Van has like a Peter Yan problem, where like they start so slow, they allow their opponents into the fights. Much more suited for 5 rounds because they go in there and they process what their opponent brings to them. They develop a game plan, or they get their reads, and then they fight accordingly. But a lot of times, like, you're wasting time, right? Like, you can't always bail yourself out, and that's the problem with these fighters like Joshua Van and Peter Yan, that you have to be very selective when you pick them. In the opposite, Cody Durden goes out there and he starts fast, man. Like, he's going to go out there and he's going to strike. He's not afraid to strike with you, and he's going to attempt his takedowns because his wrestling and his grappling is underrated. His submission defense is not my favorite, but his wrestling's pretty relentless, and he just stays busy. He stays busy while you're sitting there processing the information. So, like, I think that Cody Durden is probably going to win the first round. And then, it's like, who wins the first half of the second round? And then does Joshua Van finally get out of first gear? So it's like, you always have to worry about these things for these slow starters and these builders, if you will. And Joshua Van's a builder. He gets his reads, and then he'll look for the finish. But he has phenomenal volume. He has great volume, and his boxing so sharp. He digs to the body, some of the best in the division, if not in the UFC. And I do think that he has some underrated wrestling to him, both offensively and defensively. So it's not a cupcake matchup where Cody Durden gets him down and it's easy, or he's going to attempt to take down and get him down and it's all she wrote. I think that people might be underestimating what Joshua Van brings to the table. He has wrestled in his life, and he did showcase it offensively in 4 of his 5 fights in the UFC. Took down Borjas twice, took down Bunez once, took down Charles Johnson once, took down Edgar Chairez 3 times. So we know offensively he can do it. How does he act if he gets put in a bad position on the ground? I mean, this is a live betting stamp. This is a live betting fight all day long. As Jason pointed out, Durden probably wins the first round, get a better number on Joshua Van, and then hammer it, in my opinion, because I'm going to be backing Joshua Van. But if he never gets out of first gear, this could be a situation where Durden at 7,700 does enough, gets it done. He has beaten Jake Hadley, Johnson, Moda, JP Bays, and then most notably Matt Schnell. But I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just a believer in Joshua Van. Give me Joshua Van here at 8,500. And I do think that he can finish Cody Durden. Durden can be finished via strikes. He can also be finished via submissions. If you defend Durden's takedowns, obviously that's going to affect his confidence. So you just got to stay on him. And I hope that Joshua Van does so, because I'll be picking him here at 8,500.
Yeah, Durden's a guy that I did not expect to see him have the success that he's had in the UFC. When I saw what happened on the regional scene, but we were just talking about. To me, it comes down to is you got to be looking at him as a live betting. Joshua Van is a live betting, because I think that Cody will get off to a good start in this one. Next up, we got Michael Chiesa taking on Max Griffin. Michael Chiesa minus 120 betting fair, plus 100 for Max Griffin. Griffin $8,300 DK, $15 on FanDuel. Chiesa $7,900 DK. And $14 on FanDuel. Michael Chiesa is coming off that first-round submission win against Tony Ferguson back in August. That did snap a 3-fight losing streak. 2 of those 3 losses, by the way, did come via stoppage in the first round. Of course, he is a guy that if he's going to win, it's going to be either by submission or decision. 7 UFC wins by submission, 5 via decision. 6 of his 7 UFC losses have come via stoppage, 6 submissions and 1 TKO. KO for Max Griffin, coming off that split decision win against Jeremiah Wells back in February. He has gone the distance in 5 straight fights. 3 of his last 4 fights have ended in split decisions. So maybe if you want to chase some money and your sportsbook has a split decision prop, you might want to look at it in terms of this one. Pete, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this could be a fight where, Chiesa gets it done. I think that the underdog is definitely live. I think people could be a little bit too bullish on Chiesa because of what he did to Tony Ferguson. And, Chiesa is very unreliable in his own right because he has one path to victory. You know what he's going to do. He's going to go out there, clinch with you, take you down, work to just sandbag you or look for a submission win. But really on the feet, he doesn't have anything. He doesn't have anything for you. You ain't got to worry about nothing. I think that Chiesa is awful on the feet. I think that when the going gets tough, sometimes Chiesa can break under pressure. Max Griffin's a guy who is just mediocre, in my opinion, for the UFC, for as far as UFC level. But I do think he has some skills in some areas that outweigh Michael Chiesa. Chiesa's clearly the better wrestler and grappler. But I think that Max Griffin's pretty strong. I also think that Max Griffin has the better striking. He hits really, really hard. Sneakily, he's knocked down many opponents in the UFC. He has 8 knockdowns in the UFC. Knocked down Song Kanan, Carlos Condit, Neil Magny, Tim Means. He can definitely take advantage of the striking deficiency of Michael Chiesa. It's just like Chiesa is going to be on him, and he's going to be pitting him against the cage and making him work. And I really think that Max Griffin working with Fluffy Hernandez within his camp, I think it's going to help him, right? Who better to help you prepare for fights against the wrestler than Fluffy Hernandez? Mm-hmm. So all the time in the training room with Fluffy Hernandez, if you could defend some or defend the storm that Fluffy brings to you, we saw what he's done. We saw what he did to Michel Pereira. I would think that it would help you leading up into a fight against Michael Chiesa. I think that Chiesa had a perfect bounce back fight against Tony Ferguson, right? Mm-hmm. Some of us were hoping Tony would come through with a Darce choke because Chiesa seems to, that seems to be his Achilles heel. I'm not sold that Chiesa is going to dominate Max Griffin. And even if he gets him down, training with Fluffy, I hope will allow him to get back to his feet. Mm-hmm. Griffin will break the clinch, get on the outside, and start to outstrike Michael Chiesa, who's a sitting duck if he's unable to ragdoll you. Give me Max Griffin here to win a decision. I think that he's live to finish Michael Chiesa. I think Chiesa's best path to victory is just land a takedown around and trying to bank some rounds. But at 7,900, I expect Chiesa to be one of the most popular underdogs on the slate. I get it. I understand. I'm not just all that sold. So maybe I'm wrong, but give me Max Griffin to win a decision here.
It's just not a fight that I'm going to prioritize GVP. I mean, if I'm hand building a lineup and I have 8,300 left, and I sit there and say, okay, I got to go with one of these guys, I think I would. I see the upside for Chiesa, but I would go Max Griffin. I have more faith in him. Give you a little update here. So still no news on what's happening with Bryan Battle, but Randy Brown has gone to Instagram with this comment: 19 walks to the UFC octagon alone, 6 on the regional scene, and I've never missed weight, not one time. Like a true professional, Bryan knew he wasn't going to make weight from the day before, but still let me suffer through a weight cut. These guys bite the bullet on percentage, then come in overweight on purpose so they can get a weight advantage on fight night. I'll be no more than 185 tomorrow. I would bet he'll be over 200 tomorrow. That tells me negotiations are not going well. That tells me that, based on a conversation I had with the managers in the past, this is what that tells me. Randy Brown's people are saying, we'll take the fight. We're going to take probably 30% of your purse, and you have to weigh in again tomorrow, and you could be no more than 185. That's what that tells me.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I agree with you. I hope for my sake that the fight still goes on, because I like that fight for DFS. But yeah, it sucks, right? You got Randy Brown's completely correct. You know I picked Bryan Battle in the fight. I like Randy Brown more than Bryan Battle from a viewing and as a fan standpoint.
Yeah.
Randy Brown's completely correct. You know, Stephen Thompson did the same thing against Michelle Pajea, and he kind of got put in a bad light from the promotion, and they kind of made him suffer. You know, you didn't get your show. Okay. So if you don't want to take the fight, if he can, then we're just not going to pay you your show money, which sucks.
Look, you signed a contract that says you're going to make 171. Didn't make 171. This is. I mean, look, at this point, if you're Randy Brown, you got to make a business decision. I just hope that. I hope the fact of this isn't, they're finding Bryan Battle 20% of his purse, because if you miss weight by a pound and a half, okay, 20%, okay. When we're talking about you miss weight by 4 pounds, brother.
Jason's aggressive with it, and I love it. I see these guys get 10%, 15%. I'm like, dude, that is nothing. Jason starts at 20.
I go like, you miss weight by 1 pound. All right, hey. If Pete's got a fight in Connecticut, we sit down with Mike. I said, Mike, we want 20%. I go, but man, if you're 4 pounds, I go, Mike, negotiation starts at 50.
I mean, really, you have to. My father is like, you can always go down, you can never go up. So exactly. I'll never forget when Melvin Guillard was taking on Justin Gaethje here in the World Series of Fighting. Guillard misses weight badly. I mean, I almost want to say he missed weight by 10 pounds. I mean, it was something crazy. And I'm standing there and I'm talking to Trevor Whitman, and he comes over, he goes, yeah, we got a deal done. I go, how much you getting? He goes, 50%. I go, really? He goes, I knew Melvin. He goes, I know him. He goes, we started at 50. Yeah.
He goes, because I knew he'd take it. It's
sad when you know that, yeah.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, that is, I mean, look, but also there is the other aspect of this is there is going to be a Nevada doctor that is going to decide whether or not that doctor feels that Bryan Battle. Now, the question becomes is, did they punt on the weight cut very early on, and it was all intentional? That's
Adam Martin says, if I'm Randy Brown as manager, I am demanding 40%, 10% per pound missed. I like that. 10% per pound missed.
I'm with that. I'm definitely with you on that one.
100%. Give me your money.
Hey, we trying to make some money, bro. We trying to make some money.
That's right.
Next up, we got Clay Guida taking on Chase Hooper. Clay Guida, a plus 700 betting underdog, minus 1,300 for Chase Hooper. Hooper, 9,700 on DK, $23 on FanDuel. Guida, 6,500 on DK. And $8 on FanDuel. They did have a grappling matchup in 2022. Hooper did win that one via decision. Guida coming off a unanimous decision loss back in December of last year, so over a year now since we have seen him. Chase Hooper coming off that second round submission win against Borshev back there in May. Clay Guida is gone the distance the last 4 fights. let's just call it what it is, Pete. He loses tomorrow night. I think it'll be the final time we see Clay Guida in the UFC octagon. Chase Hooper has won 3 in a row, last 2 wins via submission. But man, that price tag of $9,700, Pete. I mean, look, I like Chase Hooper to win, but man, it's a big price tag.
It's a damn big price tag, and yeah, I'm picking Chase Hooper to win the fight. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I even think striking, he's probably the better striker in 2024. Outside of a big overhand left or a big looping hook. I mean, we've seen Clay Guida knock down people with uppercuts like Joe Lozon, and but we're talking years ago. He didn't get finished against Silva. He didn't get finished against Garcia. He did get finished against Claudio Puelles. And he beat Scott Holtzman, but that was back in 2022. He was able to implement his wrestling and out-wrestle the wrestler in Holtzman because he's just a grinder, right? Like, if you have a grinding style, Clay Guida will best you. But if you have a finishing style, especially if you are a submission finisher, you're probably going to catch Clay Guida in something. So that's kind of what I'm expecting to happen here. Chase Hooper, very unorthodox with his jiu-jitsu. I saw that he's been training with Mikey Musumeci too, so like that's only going to help him. That's only going to make his jiu-jitsu even better, even if it's just like a couple things. I think that Clay Guida at 6,500 is so cheap that he could, if it goes to 15 minutes, he could do enough in a loss. Like say he scores 39.1 as he did against Silva at 6,500. That 6,500 allows you to get up to some of the most massive favorites on the slate. So it's definitely beneficial. I just don't trust Clay Guida's submission defense. I just think that against the submission fighter, he's going to get subbed. And sometimes he tries to strength out of some things. He almost got submitted against Silva in a guillotine choke a couple times, was able to get out of it. I obviously think that Chase Hooper's jiu-jitsu is legitimate. Like, he's very, very legit. He's looked good. He's been on a win streak against some very tough fighters, beating Vyacheslav Borshev, then Jordan Levitt, and then Nick Fiore. Like he's putting together good performances out there, whereas Clay Guida's best days are behind him. I will tell you that when I was out in New Mexico, training in New Mexico, when Clay Guida was going to face Anthony Pettis, I don't think there was anybody that I knew out in New Mexico that was thinking Clay Guida was going to beat Anthony Pettis, because in training, Guida was getting submitted with everything. And sometimes people just show up, and he's been a guy that in the training room, not the best. Under the lights, sometimes surprises people, and he goes out there and he just finds a way to win. But his submission defense is something that's been a big hole in his game basically his whole career. And I think Chase Hooper capitalizes, and I think he submits him. So give me Chase Hooper at 9,700. And yeah, he's already done it once in a submission grappling. I don't trust Guida to not get submitted.
Yeah, I mean, I like Chase Hooper to go out there and get the win in this one. To me, it just comes down to it's a roster construction aspect of if you're going to put someone like a 9,700, and then look, I think if you say, you know what, I'm going to build a lineup around Chase Hooper, I think then you're probably looking at Ian Garry is your second fighter in your lineup, and going from there to try to figure out how to put that lineup there together. Their opening matchup is a heavyweight matchup. Kenny Nzechukwu taking on Lucas Brzeski. Nzechukwu is a my 600 betting favorite, plus 400 for Brzeski. Brzeski 6,800 on DK. $10 on FanDuel. Nzechukwu $9,400 on DK and $21 on FanDuel. We saw Nzechukwu make his UFC heavyweight debut back there in October, getting a first-round win against Chris Barnett. 6 of his 7 wins in the UFC have come via stoppage. Brzeski, on the other side, he is coming off a first-round TKO loss against Mick Parkin back in July, 1-4 in the UFC. His only win in the UFC was a decision win against Volkan Walker. As I mentioned, I think this fight card is going to feature a ton of fighters. It's going to be the last time we see him in the UFC octagon, and you can put Lucas Brzeski right there in that category.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, he's the true heavyweight. Lucas Brzeski's the true heavyweight. He has the career within the heavyweight division, but I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, right? Like, I think that light heavyweights, for the most part, are more skilled fighters than the heavyweight division, who are slow. They are not everybody's a Tom Aspinall. That's why he's so special, right? Like, for the most part, the heavyweight division is the worst skill division. Poor cardio for most people. Brzeski doesn't really check any boxes other than like being tough at times and throwing some good volume as he did in his debut against Martin Buday. Threw 118 significant strikes, lost the decision, scored 48.4. Could he do that? And if it goes 15 minutes, that's something where he could do enough in a loss. He is the true heavyweight, so Kennedy's chin has abandoned him at some times, and that's the one worry about Kennedy, priced at 9,400 always, is like, okay, well, is he going to be able to take some of these shots? I think so. I mean, like Dustin Jacoby, high-level striker, he knocked him out. Da Un Jung, pretty solid, pretty powerful, knocked him out. Outside of that, his chin's held up, and even against a guy in OSP who outstruck him via volume, which really blew my mind. That's the last time Kennedy was 9,400. He lost. He lost a decision against a guy that doesn't throw volume. So sometimes he's just staring there, and he's just like blankly staring and not doing anything. And that's where Kennedy can lose. I don't think Bresky's good, man. I don't think Bresky's good. The fact that he beat Walter Walker doesn't prove anything to me. I think Kennedy has a grappling advantage over him. I think he has a size and reach advantage over him. And I think he has a striking and volume advantage over him. I think Kennedy can win this fight any way possible. And I like him much better here at heavyweight rather than light heavyweight. The competition's not as hard. It's not as difficult. And you're probably going to be the more skilled, speedy fighter. So, yeah, give me the former light heavyweight in Kennedy Nzechukwu to pick up a finish over Lukasz Bresky. But at 9,400, I mean, I like him, but I like some other, high-priced options more. And I don't have to worry about the possibility of him laying an egg or of him just taking his time and then working into the fight. So give me Kennedy to win the fight. I think he does it pretty easily.
I'd rather spend $300 less and get to Dominick Reyes at 9,100 as opposed to a 9,400. I mean, look, I would even rather go to a 9,000 Ciryl Gane in this situation. Because I kind of would – a concern I would have is it maybe goes – you have the mentality of, hey, let's get some cage time in here in the heavyweight division, but Kennedy definitely should get the win there. Let's get into our straight-up fight picks here. Main event, give me Still Pantoja.
Pantoja.
God, I feel like I'm going to sound stupid here. I'm going to say it. Underdog number one, Ian Machado, Garry.
Yeah, I'm really surprised we're aligned with that. Give me Ian Garry.
I'll go Ciryl Gane.
Ciryl Gane.
Bryce Mitchell.
Bryce Mitchell.
Nate Landwehr. Dom Reyes.
It's favorite city for me for the most part.
Themba Gorimbo. Underdog number two, Aljo.
Movsar Evloev for me.
The missing weight here has really thrown me off on this one.
It always is that wild card.
I think Bryan Battles should win here. I just wonder, is there something... And this is the thing that always scares me about a guy missing weight. Is there something more? Is there an injury related? I'm going to say Bryan Battle. I think I'll put some money on Randy Brown tomorrow, though.
I like that. I'm with you on that. If the fight happens. There's an interview that once I get off this, I'm going to listen to it. Aaron Bronstetter posted it.
I saw that clip come up, and when Randy Brown walked up, he looked furious.
Yeah, I gotta listen to that once we get off of this. But yeah, I'm picking Bryan Battle.
I'll go Chris Weidman.
Joshua Van.
Griffin. So that's our number three for me. Chase Hooper. And Kennedy Nzechukwu. Samuel, I appreciate the super chat that he put in there for us. Says, who do we like as your top three ceiling fighters, and what shall be the possible scores for upside? Thanks, Samuel. Appreciate the super chat there. I think when we talk about upside, I think it starts with the main event, Pantoja, especially because of the grappling upside he would have in that one. I could see him just laying takedowns, racking up control time there. I think Dom Reyes, you brought up a great point earlier, possible quick win bonus there. Themba Gorimbo, I think, is another one. If he's able to utilize wrestling, and this is a guy that averages nearly 5 takedowns per 15 minutes of fighting, those would be the ones that I would throw up there.
Okay, I'll give you my top 4 for ceiling. I think Pantoja's 1. 5 rounds really helps. I think co-main events 2. So whether it's Shavkat or Ian Garry. I think Joshua Van is 3 for me. I think that he has so much volume and there's a potential for a finish. And then I'll give you one, number 4. I know you're on the opposite side, but let's say that he's in the driver's seat with the wrestling. I think Movsar Evloev can rack up takedowns if he chooses to, and you know that Aljo is skilled enough to get back to his feet. This could be a scramble and wrestling fest, which could result in DFS scoring, galore. So I'm gonna put Evloev at 4. So that's kind of like 4 ceiling plays that I really like.
Move over to the questions from Discord. First up from Tristan, best leverage play. So I'm looking at someone like a Ciryl Gane who's underneath 20%. Say if he can maybe get that 3rd round finish. He's been talking about utilizing that grappling. Also you look at those high end options of Chase Hooper and Bryce Mitchell. I think the price point is going to scare some people away from them. That to me would be another potential leverage play. And then like the other leverage plays are really fights that you just don't want to get to. Chiesa Griffin, Anders Weidman, Evloev Sterling. Maybe look at Evloev Sterling as, somebody who's going to show that they're the better grappler and rack up some points.
Yeah. Oh man, DraftKings got Bryan battle with a Q tag. I don't like that. But I think that's just precautionary. So who is a leverage spot? I mean, maybe Bryce Mitchell. I mean, I don't know what the ownership's going to be on him, but you have a guy coming off his worst loss ever, and there's potential for him to smash. He's a ranked fighter against an unranked fighter who's been inactive. There's potential for it. I like the Gane call, Jason. I think the Gane call for leverage is interesting. Not saying that Volkov's going to, be heavily owned or anything, but I think that Ciryl Gane could be overlooked.
Yeah. Next up from Tristan, best takedown upside. I look at Pantoja. I think you got to look at Gorimbo just because of what he has shown in the past.
Yes. And Movsar for me.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of all that.
Yeah, I guess Bryce too. It's just such a bad idea.
Yeah. Next up, ranking the 9K option. Mention we got 6 9K options. It's number 1 for me would. God, I hate to say it. I really hate to say Chase Hooper, but I think this is the end of the line for Clay Guida. I would probably go Chase 1, Dom Reyes 2, Njeku 3, Mitchell 4, Rakhmonov 5, Gane 6.
It's really hard. I think I put Gane last. I think I put Hooper first. And I think I just kind of shuffle the middle a little bit. I put Njeku second, Reyes third, Rakhmonov fourth, Mitchell fifth, Gane sixth.
Next up here, we got value plays underneath 8K. So when you look at underneath 8K, Cody Durden, I think he's going to get off to a hot start. Could he potentially finish Joshua Van, say, in that first round? Randy Brown, we got to kind of see how that one plays out. Aljo, Ian Garry, those would be my value plays underneath 8K.
Yeah, my value play is Ian Garry. I don't hate the Kai Asakura, long shot. Chris Weidman, I guess, but he's 8K. I think you could go Durden / Luque, and I wouldn't hate it. Outside of that, I hate all the underdogs.
I think in terms of and also asked about a core 3 on DraftKings, I'd probably say a core 3 for me would be Pantoja, Landwehr, and Reyes.
I like that.
Let's see here. Sam's got his questions. Favorite live dogs.
I'm just saying that the tag on Gracie to win via submission is stupid.
Yeah, I know. Live dogs, Asakura I would put in there just because of the striking power that he does have. Ian Garry would be another one that I would throw in there.
I think Randy Brown. I think it's a close fight, especially given the unknowns.
Yeah. Favorite captains and MVPs. Looking over in terms of on the captain side, in terms of DraftKings, I would expect Pantoja is going to be highly owned. I do love the upside there with the grappling. Garry Rakhmonov would not necessarily be a captain play. They'd be just more of a rostering them regularly. Dom Reyes, especially if he can get a victory in the first round. Gorimbo, to me, would be another one because of that takedown upside. On the FanDuel side of the equation, when we're talking about, the captains over there, a lot of the same kind of names that I would throw out there. Maybe if you're looking for something different, maybe Nate Landwehr as your captain.
That's a good one. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to get off this video and listen to the interview of Randy Brown because I'm like very intrigued. I like him a lot, and I think that he's highly intelligent. I mean, it's a guy who also has a podcast. He's a very, very smart guy, very cerebral fighter. I'm expecting even how he wrote that post, Jason, he's making great points. He's right. He's completely right. We need something needs to change, but I don't think it ever will. There's always going to be weight misses.
Exactly. Top punt plays. Yeah, I don't love the punt plays, especially when I'm looking at fighters who are underneath 10%.
I think it's Gracie, dude.
Yeah, I mean that'd probably be the one, but yeah, I just don't really love it. In terms of our specials, Pete's already talked about he doesn't love the 8,000 fight. The first fight of the night scares me. I mean, if you're going to play one side, you just play Kennedy. I just do not want to go to Brzeski in terms of that one. And we'll wrap up here with some questions I did see come in here over on YouTube. Michael asking, Hooper have a path to 120 points?
Yeah, I think he does. I definitely do. He would need to strike and out-volume Clay Guida for a while, kind of like Diego Sanchez him, and then implement some takedowns and take him down. I wish he was a better wrestler because Guida's definitely the better wrestler of the two. But the guy who's smooth with transitions and reversals and counters is Chase Hooper.
Next up here, Ryan saying top value and top high-end pivots for DraftKings GPPs. I mean, look, it's, we kind of talked about the leverage aspect of this. Ciryl Gane could be a very interesting if you're looking for a leverage in that 9,000 range because – look, I think that a lot of those fighters above him are going to be very popular. I'll be interested to see what Rakhmonov's ownership ultimately ends up being in terms of that one. But there is definitely some pivots you can go to.
How about this, Jason? Just from a game theory pivot. And I like it because I've done it. No 9,000 fighters.
Yeah?
Very unique. I'm in love with the mid-range this week as it is.
Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, if you say Pantoja and Garry, that puts you in a really good position. But Pantoja is only 800, and I think Pantoja has great value over there on FanDuel. We're going to end with this question here from Joe. He says, we all know Evloev will be popular. Do we have any concerns? He gets away from the takedowns to stay away from Sterling's grappling, and it's a 15-minute striking matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I would think Movsar, for the most part, would probably want to keep it standing because I do think that he's clearly the better striker than Aljamain Sterling, who just kind of button mashes. He just spams his strikes, and there's not a lot of thought behind it. Where I think that Movsar is a very good striker. He'll think about it, but I also think you have to realize Movsar is training an American top team. That whole room is so filthy with wrestling and grappling. There are better fighters on those mats that are 155 pounds, 45, 35, that are testing Movsar equal to or even more so than what Aljo is going to do, in my personal opinion. So I don't think that Movsar is going to be afraid of it. I think that if anything, he's going to try to show I'm better than you in your best spot. Sometimes fighters fight with their ego. I could totally see that happening for Movsar.
Yeah. By the way, I want to mention this before we get out of here. I'm not a big MMA apparel guy.
What'd you get?
The fighting nerds have put out their own apparel line.
Oh, yeah, dude. So sick.
Dude, I saw it on Instagram. I'm like, I might have to buy one of them hoodies.
You might have to get some Carlos Prates. Yeah, some Gene Silva. Dude, I love that. They're killing it.
Emilio Ritia, who I call Old Down Fights with, he's training with Prates. And he goes, bro, It is no joke. He goes, this dude smokes a pack a day. He goes, this is not some gimmick. He goes, this is truly him. He is a pack a day smoker, which is just crazy. I
love
mean,
it.
It's just,
I love it.
Yeah.
It
But
is
I
crazy.
saw that on Instagram. I was like, damn, that's some good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But hey, thank you guys for joining us for the show. It's a good card. I'm excited. I hope I'm right on some of these matchups. Obviously, we all hope we are. I hope regardless that you guys have success. A lot of times when I don't have DFS success, I pivot and I just go straight to sports betting, and that's where I really, really have a good time. If you are using, DFS, and if you are playing DFS and you're looking to get an advantage, make sure you take advantage of the Sims tool or any of the MMA packages that Stochastic is offering with our discount code in the description below. Fight HQ can help you guys get 15% off. Great tools, really helps you, especially if you are playing in the 150 max. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But regardless, it gives you a feel for the field and what to expect come Saturday night.
Their signature builder is a nice little tool they have over there as well.
I haven't even used it yet, so that's kind of more my style. So I might have to try that. But yeah, I think that we're gonna learn a lot in the co-main event, right? We're gonna learn a lot, and either Ian Garry was, just perfect matchups up until now, and gets exposed by the best finisher within the welterweight division, who maybe is one of the best plays in Shavkat Rakhmonov, or stylistically you have a guy who's completely underappreciated in Ian Garry as a big underdog. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. You can hit that like button every single time we do a video. Try to get us over 100 likes. It really goes a long way. Engage with us in the comments. Hit us up through Discord. Jason's the best. He does so much for this show, does so much in general. But we do really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, appreciate everyone that tunes in each and every week. Of course, we got one more episode left here in 2024. That'll be next week. Of course, UFC Tampa as Colby Covington returns, take on Joaquin Buckley. So we'll be back here next week to get you ready for that one. Of course, we got our DraftKings contest as well. Be sure to sign up that, and we appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of the Fight HQ podcast.